Okay, just get set up here. Forms. All right. Just getting set up for the live stream of when I record the podcast. Okay, everything's good. That's recording. Okay. Hey guys, I'm going to start recording here. So, welcome to the Alleyways Podcast. Once again, I'm Ben Backus, talking about local government issues for those of you that are interested. And I'm going to talk about forms of your local government today, because let's say you've been listening to the last couple podcasts and you've been going to your city council meetings. Like I said, you figured out the rules of your city, and you went to your city council person and you had something you wanted them to address, and they said, "Well, I don't handle that." So you're probably wondering, who's running this show anyways? Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, not everybody has the same form of government for their city government. There's essentially two main types of city government. You have council manager government and mayor council government. They're kind of the same, but they're not. So probably talk about council manager government first. Council manager is essentially your city's ran by a board of directors. There's not really any one city council member who has more power than the others. I mean, you still have a mayor, but a mayor in a council manager form of government is not elected by the people. He's just selected from the city council, gets together at their first meeting of the council session, typically in January, and they pick who's going to be the mayor. And that guy is usually just in a figurehead position pretty much. He goes to all the ribbon cuttings, for everything that needs signed by a mayor. He puts his name on it. But the only real power he has is power of personality. So the council members, though, they oversee the general administration of the government. They make policy. They'll set the budget. The city manager, he's usually the one that crafts a budget and they approve it. But I'm sure in some smaller cities, they may craft the whole budget. And I mentioned a city manager. So the city manager is the person appointed by the council to carry out the day-to-day operations. So really, this is the guy who's running the show. And they're appointed by the council, so they have to have a majority. So depending on how many people on your council, it's 3 or 5. And that's who's calling all the shots. So pretty much the council controls the manager, and the manager runs the departments. He can hire and fire department heads. Like I said, a lot of times they'll make the budget. And he just does everything that needs to be done. He's the day-to-day guy. And this is typically the most popular form of government. And in a lot of smaller cities that have this form of government, city council members, sometimes they aren't even paid, because you have a city manager who's pretty much doing everything, and they're just getting together once in a while to vote on policy decisions. So, and it's become more popular in the last couple decades. It used to be only smaller cities used it, but now a lot of larger cities are. So I don't know if that's part of the reason why it seems like some of these bigger cities have a lot of issues. Is it because they have a trained professional city management guy in there calling the shots instead of a city council? I don't know. That's just what I've noticed. So the other form of government is called your mayor council government. And it's a little more complicated. I'll get into that. But your mayor and in a mayor council government, he is elected separately from council. I mean, he's not picked by council. He's picked by the people. He's elected at the same time as council members are elected. Typically, kind of getting a little off track, but typically in council elections, they only reelect half the council at a time. I mean, you don't want to overturn your entire city council all at once. It would inflict a lot of chaos, but hey, maybe that's what you want, but sorry, it's not going to happen. They typically do half the council one every 2 years, and the mayor slipped in on one of those cycles. So back on track here. So the mayor, he's elected separately. Larger cities, he's often full-time. Of course, in a smaller city, you're not going to have a full-time mayor. They can't afford the budget to have one. And he has significant administrative and budget authority. He can hire and fire people. He can, typically he doesn't hire and fire anybody below administrative head position. But if you want to shake up a department, you get rid of the head and bring in a new one, and that'll shake up the department. And sometimes he hires and fires. It's not the only guy that does it. Sometimes in mayor council government, they hire a professional administrator who has limited authority, but he handles a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and he's given the power to hire and fire department heads, except for officers of a city. The officers of a city, they answer to council. The mayor appoints them, council approves them. Also, the mayor can fire them, but the council still has to approve the mayor wanting to fire them. So the mayor has a little bit of shakeup ability when it comes to officers, but department heads, he can just let the heads roll if that's what he wishes. And your officers on a mayor council, back to council manager though, your officers, it varies whether they're appointed or they may not even have officers, and everybody's just under the rule of the manager. So mayor council, a lot of times there's officers who are kind of above a department head, and the city council runs them. So usually you have your attorneys, your treasurer, your city attorney, your city treasurer, your city engineer, and your city clerk are usually officers, and they can only be hired or fired by your city council approving the mayor's decision. Now, council can't, it'd be a convoluted process, but council could end around the mayor and try and get rid of an officer. But once again, he makes the agenda, so it could get ugly if they wanted to do that. So a lot of times you don't want to get rid of officers if the mayor isn't on board with it. So like I said, they'll also have an administrator who's kind of like manager light. He does day-to-day running of stuff, and he's under the direct control of the city council. So say there's a department head that the city council wants to get rid of. They could go through have the administrator do that, but once again, he has to answer to the mayor. So a lot of checks and balances in mayor council. And it's mostly found in very large cities or very small cities. And for some reason, it's really popular in the Midwest and some of the mid-Atlantic states. A lot of the council manager ones I was talking about previously, they're popular on the West Coast. So lending some more credence to my screwed up cities idea. And, a lot of the Midwest cities, you'll find they're run fairly well. So maybe that has something to do with it. And, even back to the mayor thing, even with the mayor, there's another check and balance you have in the mayor council system. You have a weak mayor and a strong mayor. A weak mayor, that's relating back to the council manager where I said that he doesn't really have any power. Council has the legislative and executive power in that case. The mayor can't veto, and council, he can block the mayor. They can block the mayor from supervising city administration because, he doesn't really have any power to do anything. And a weak mayor system, there's usually plenty of boards and commissions that are operating independent from city government. They might not even have city elected officials on these boards and commissions, and they'll make recommendations to city council. And depending on the city charter, some of these boards will have quite a bit of power, like city council might not be able to override their recommendations unless they have like a 3/4 vote or something like that. But even then, with your mayor, there's still a little bit of blending of the power between a weak and a strong mayor. The strong mayor, he's pretty much, if you have a strong mayor, he's basically the CEO, like I talked about in a mayor council government. And if you think about it in terms of the federal government, the mayor is essentially the executive branch. Council's the legislative branch, so they have a check and balance there. And the mayor and a strong mayor, he can veto. So if the city council passes something, if it just barely passes, he can veto it. They got to come back with 3/4 or sometimes even more than that, depending on the city, to override the mayor veto. And that's quite a powerful position for a mayor to have. And, in a weak and a strong mayor system, council isn't involved with daily operations hardly at all. But even saying that, with the two systems kind of blend into each other a little bit. I'll use the two cities in my local area as an example. Scotts Bluff and Gearing, they're separated by a river. Scotts Bluff is a mayor council or a council manager form of government, but they still have some strong mayor blending a little bit. They have boards that have council members on it and make recommendations to council as a whole. But other than that, not really. It seems like the mayor council don't blend in as much. The city I'm in is a mayor council form of government, but he has a little bit of weak mayor blended in. Like the council in Gearing, they oversee the daily operations of stuff, which is typically seen in a weak mayor or a strong mayor form of government. Some of the weak stuff they have boards and commissions that operate independent from the city government that have citizens on them. So they've kind of taken, one city kind of has no checks and balances on officials really, but Gearing seems to have brought the checks and balances that are in the mayor council system and blended them into the strong mayor system. So it's kind of weird how two cities next to each other have a completely different form of government. And I guess I'll get into the pros and cons of the two since I'm comparing them. So in a council manager form of government, the pro of it would be it's definitely more stable, because the person running stuff day to day is going to be that city manager. And really, to fire the city manager, you need 3 people in council to get pissed off at him enough to fire him. And even then, they're not firing the department heads. That's still going to be the duty of the new manager when he comes in. So you're going to have a lot of continuation of things, which I guess is good if your city is doing things right. But if your city's kind of screwed up, you're going to have that continuation. I mean, I guess it's going to be hard to drain the swamp if you're in a council manager form of government. The upside also to a council manager form of government, where the city manager is unelected, he's less susceptible to political influence. So if you're one of those people that believes in making a greater good decision besides pissing everyone off, that's going to be a city manager form of government, because he's not going to be worried about getting reelected if he pisses off everybody in his block for making a decision on something, because he only has to answer to 3 people. I mean, he only has to get 3 people to approve of what he's doing to save his spot. Whereas, a city council person has to answer to, depending on the size of your ward or your representative district, you got to answer to a lot of people. So one of the cons of city manager, let's see, it's probably, like I mentioned, it's harder to hold an elected official accountable. A lot of the city manager, council manager forms of government, they vote by at-large districts. So you don't have a representative for your area. It's harder for citizens to interact with the government because, a lot of people don't understand that, it's not the elected officials that are running stuff. It's a city manager with an office in the back, and he's pretty insulated from the public. He only has to be as interactive as he feels like, or as council gets after him to be. So the strong mayor form of government, council mayor, you have very visible leadership. Hey, this guy's the mayor. I know he can get shit done. I'm going to complain to him. Or I know who my council person is. They represent my ward. I know he can override the mayor on stuff. I know he has the mayor's ear. I'm going to talk to him. So really, in that form of government, your leadership is directly accountable to the voter. Because you can have a sweeping change if you get a mayor in there. If you want a mayor to get in there and make heads roll, that's a form of government where you can do it. He can come in, you get the mayor in there, you get a council that's going to work with him. You can wipe out departments, and you'll drain that swamp for sure. He also has control over the budget. He has control over a lot of executive decisions. The mayor can lay down some sweeping changes if he gets a council working with him. And you can get if you get a council that's kind of in chaos in the council manager system, the manager can really run roughshod and do what he still feels like doing in there, because the council doesn't have the political know-how to counter him. I guess the con of what would be the con of it? I guess the con of it would be, politics are going to weigh a lot into the decisions, which, good or bad, depending on what you think about it. If you're on city council or you're the mayor, you got to think about, boy, if I do this, are these people going to throw my ass out of office next election? There's always a threat of a recall. People get really pissed off. You can't recall a city manager. He's in there. But you can sure recall a mayor if they get mad enough. So you're gonna think about politics on a lot of decisions if that's a form of government that your city council has. So, good or bad, I think it's good. You don't get out of touch with people. You got to stay in touch to know, is this a good idea, bad idea? And seems like a lot of politicians in that other system, they think they don't have to listen to people for some reason. There are a couple other, I had to look these ones up because I didn't know anything about them. I was writing notes and stumbled across these other ones. There are some other government forms that are used in probably 10 to 15% of cities in America, and one of them is commission. So I don't know if anybody listening to this has a commission form of city government. Basically, each commissioner is elected and is in charge of a specific aspect of government, which I think is interesting. How do you know you're going to get a finance guy or police guy running for a commission position? I guess you just get put where they need you. And the commission, they hold legislative and executive powers. Town meeting form of government is basically it's kind of like a direct democracy form of city government. Voters, they're going to choose your policy and elect officials to carry out policy. So I guess they have an election every time they want to choose a policy, and that's how they make it work. Then you have a representative town meeting, and that's kind of like the direct democracy one, but they throw in some representation in it. Voters, they pick a large group of, this is popular on the East Coast in some spots, I guess. they pick a large group of citizens to represent them, and those they vote on all the policies. So I don't know, that seems, these last two seem like herding cats to me. I mean, in direct democracy, that's never good. That's just socialism, communism plus one. And the representative one, I mean, geez, I was looking at one that some city had a couple hundred representatives. It's hard enough getting 4 people to agree on something. I can just imagine getting 100 some to agree on something. But that's all I got. That's all the forms of government for your cities. Figure out what your city government is if you're going to start getting active. So, if you need to be bugging the mayor or city council, or bugging several people in city council to get rid of that no good city manager who's running the city into the ground. As always, thanks for tuning in. Any questions, go ahead and post them and I'll answer them as I can. Thanks.